Thank you, Carol. Nice to be back here with you. And it is year 7 of a 3-year project. No, it was going to be a 6-year project, but then, as you know, the board, in its wisdom, extended it for another 3. So this is year 7. I couldn't go this year for various reasons, but in my stead, Pearl and Marvin led the team, and this is the team. Mary March from Victoria, from Central Baptist. And so when she was getting up in front of the crowd, she would say, I bring you greetings from Canada, from the Prime Minister, and also from Central Baptist Church in Victoria. So I am so grateful to Tim Folkman, because he is the one connection that I have with all of you. He represents you to me. So if I have an issue, it's Tim I go to, and he resolves it. And it makes it all a lot easier. So for some of you who don't know the project, let me just quickly say, the whole point is to give widows a chance to break free from slavery, from the hand-to-mouth existence that they had. They have to beg to their neighbors who have land to let them work in their fields for the day so that they could take home some food. They're given food, not money, so that they could cook supper for their dependents. And many of these widows not only have their own children, but they've taken in other orphans. It's an amazing thing. It's very, very moving. These are real heroes. So I'm very, very honored and grateful to you people for making it possible for us to serve these guys. And even during the COVID years when we weren't traveling, our people in the field, Ellie Nankunda and Rose Kibarita, who are major movers and shakers in the field, they were able to carry on the work without us. So we didn't have teams traveling there to interview the widows, but 100 widows were added each year. So now this project is supporting 838 widows and countless dependents. So this team worked very, very hard, harder than we normally do when we go. Now, there are 2 or 3 of you that I recognize in this crowd here who've already been. There's Mike sitting there. He went with Kathleen and Dave Barlow. Is Kathleen Coyle here? No. She's alive and well? Good. Major faux pas. Anyway, it's a pleasure to travel, and I'm hoping to do that next year with another team. And it'll be a larger team. And maybe some of you will consider coming with us. It's normally 3 weeks, and we also add in a bit of game viewing as well. But 7 or 8, sometimes maybe 10 days in the project area, interviewing widows and visiting the fields and their homes and getting to know their situation. So it was wonderful for me to be able to send these 3. Now I'm going to sit down and enjoy the presentation.
I just wanted to thank David and Tim Folkman for the privilege to be able to lead the team this year. For Mary, it was her first time in Uganda, so she is going to tell you about her first impressions of Uganda. Marvin was returning, and we did have the opportunity to interview widows from various years, right from those that are starving, that are about to get their seeds in February, all the way back to those that were first sponsored in 2016. So Marvin's going to describe some of the changes he sees from the different years, and then I'm going to come and tell you how to be a millionaire. And this was actually a joint project with the Uganda Possibilities Project from Bay Community Church, so I'm going to give you a little update on that too, and we're going to finish off with a video.
I'm up. Boy, are you in trouble. I can't see you, but I can see this. That's important. I can't stand still. That's not going to work. It was on April Fool's Day this year. Pearl sent me an email. It said, "Crazy idea, question mark." She asked if I would be interested in traveling to Uganda. To me, the answer was a no-brainer because I had been asking God for a project and spiritual growth, but we did take time to pray about it. Once we had decided to go, Pearl found that things inexplicably falling into place, just as it does when God is preparing the way before us. At the time, Ephesians 2:10 kept coming to mind. We are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. God had prepared the work. We just had to show up. We flew to Uganda in September for 2 weeks, which left us a week to be on the ground in the village of Kabyunda. When thinking about what I saw in Uganda, the word that comes to mind is dichotomy. It's a land where you can see contrasts between things that are opposed or entirely different. People with few belongings and seemingly no disposable income were clutching cell phones. There is no visible house numbers and no road signs, but people are ordering from internet sites like Amazon. There is a hand washing station at the front of a Christian school with a gravity-fed water system and a motion sensor faucet. As we drove along the road between the cities, there were innumerable stands with people selling everything: tomatoes, garlic, eggplant, potatoes, pineapples, avocados, jackfruit, watermelon, fish, and a myriad of other things, and the ever-present bananas. The land seems to be extremely fertile, and yet most of the widows dreamed of being able to feed their households until they were satisfied. We started out in Kampala, a very large city, and it was kind of overwhelming, and I was overwhelmed, let's just put it that way. The smelling of cooking fires and rubbish smoke hangs in the air and makes a constant haze. But David assures me that's not all the time, and that was just a bad day. Streets were dirt paths with vehicles, bodas, which are motorcycles being used as taxis. So you can have 4 people on a motorcycle with children stuck in between them or under the arm. Chickens, goats, people, it was crazy. No traffic lights, probably no traffic rules. Motorcyclists without helmets, construction workers without hard hats, lots of guards to protect against theft. But you know, one became accustomed to this. The university students I met preferred the city to the village. It works. It's a crazy city, but it works. Uganda has a lot of people. I won't give you all the details, but BC has a population of over 5 million. That's 5.6 individuals per square kilometer. Uganda has 202 individuals per square kilometers. It's 48 million people, which is 10 million more than all of Canada. It's hard to get out of sight of another person. For the government, currently there is peace in Uganda, but the young people are wanting change after over 36 years with the same president. Older people are fearful of change as they remember Idi Amin's reign and the following years of fear, massacre, and destruction. There is no income tax, so building infrastructure is difficult. The government is trying to install electricity and water in the village of Kabyunda. It is close, but it's not there yet. Government schools are free, but they require school uniforms and supplies. So children are often not in school due to this lack of school fees. At one time, Uganda was a British colony, and as such, there is a strong Christian influence on the culture. We found modesty, respect, and generosity valued. Right now, there's an opportunity to enter into Uganda and to lend a helping hand. We need to take advantage of it while we can. I have a long list of we saws. We saw people breaking rocks with hammers to make gravel for an income. We saw people collecting sticks for their cooking fires. We saw plantations that are interplanted with green beans and corn around the edges. We saw that water was a concern everywhere. People carry yellow plastic jerry cans, and some have installed water collection systems to collect the water off their roofs during the rainy season. We saw growing eucalyptus forests where they harvest the poles to use for building and cooking fires. We saw a lady whose hands were cooked, that'd be terrible, whose hands were cut off with a machete in an attack. We saw laundry being done in a basin and hung on bushes to dry. We saw young girls and women get really excited about laundry soap and toilets. Don't get me started. We went to church and an auction broke out. Tithing was done with produce and several chickens, and the offerings were then auctioned off and the funds went to the church. At the end of church, they invited a young adult man to come up, and he announced that he was not the right age, but he was trying to raise money so that he could go to primary 7. He was trying to finish that grade. So he sang a beautiful song, and there was a basket in front of him, and people put donations in. I don't know if he received or achieved his goal, but I can't imagine a Canadian adult man being brave enough to persevere in an attempt to finish 7th grade. There's a van that was donated to the school and is driven by our host, and it looks like a van, but it's got the heart of a Hummer. It is a 4-wheel drive. The roads are really a dirt path that is hard, but rutted by runoff, so there's not a square meter anywhere that is flat or even. Ellie drives slowly. He zigzags back and forth in the van, lurching along like a drunken one-legged sailor, honking frequently to greet walkers and motorbikes. It's quite the experience. Widows, when we interviewed the widows, they often repeated the same thing. They talked about their need for food, and then school fees, and then medicines. They talked about today's desperate need for food and the future's hope with the Widows Garden Project. I was interested to know how these widows had become widows. I mean, for me, it's cancer, but what's it for everybody else? Well, I have a list of the ladies I talked to. It is drowning, accident, kidney failure, hernia, malaria, food poisoning, diarrhea, AIDS, madness, diabetes, constipation, typhoid, stroke, asthma, liver failure, operations, heart failure, and unknown illnesses. They have also lost a lot of children for the same reasons, plus measles, death at birth, stillbirth, domestic violence, and COVID. The ladies were often not schooled, and they had some problems with math. One lady told us she had been married 5 years and had 9 children in that time. And we said, well, do you have any twins? No, she didn't. We were a little confused, so we talked to her about it for a while, and then she decided maybe she'd been married more than 5 years. Sometimes when marriages collapse, children are rejected by both parents and are sent to the grandparents to raise. Stepmothers and fathers can reject the children, and they're sent to the grandparents to raise. Parents die, they're sent to the grandparents to raise. And then the grandfather dies, and now you have a grandmother raising multiple grandchildren from multiple children, and that's how they wind up with dependents. You're going to see on the video, one lady has 12 dependents. This was not outrageous. We saw a lot of houses. Some were fancy painted ones. There were a number of brick ones. Some were partly built, some were fully built. We saw a lot of mud houses that were sturdy with metal roofs, and we saw some mud houses not so sturdy. And we were taken to see one particular mud house. An older lady named Venice lives there with 5 dependent children. She manages to send 2 of the children to school. Mud houses are built by erecting poles and then weaving branches through it and then packing on the mud in the hopes, I guess, that the sun is going to dry it nice and hard. And the roof on Venice's house was a tarp draped over poles and then covered by banana leaves. When we stepped inside, we could see that one corner had a small fire in a pot. One corner contained her possessions and some food of a hoe. A hoe, that was her possession, and food. Clothes were draped over a pole in the ceiling, and blankets lay on the floor of half of the building. That is where 6 people slept and lived. We could see the holes in the walls and in the roof. Venice talked about water coming through the walls during rainy times. Since we left Uganda, part of the roof blew it off. Venice is in desperate need for a new house. There is a plan for a replacement house and a quote for $2,400 Canadian. We are waiting to see how God is going to fund the building. We're hoping it's quick. There are other widows who need shelter, but this is the one we know about, and the case is urgent. We went to town, we thought, to observe the landlords signing their contracts and collecting payment. First, we stopped at the printers. There's a number of schools in the area. They all use the same printer shop. If you have any business needing paperwork, I suspect you go to the same printer if you live there. And after despairing for some time, our host returned to advise us that the printer had not run off the contracts, but they would rush them now. So we went to the bank and we sat in a room and we twiddled our thumbs for well over an hour while they rushed the jobs. So then we had the contracts, and then we carefully had the names written in. Oh, now you need a copy. There's no photocopier at the bank either, so we hand wrote them out, a copy of each contract. To an office worker like myself, not having office equipment like printers and copiers is mind-blowing. My last little story for you is about Gift. Gift is a young lady who cooked for us while we were there. She was traveling with us back to Mbara to catch a large bus, which would take her back to Kampala so she could return to university. We watched as one of the boys in the backyard caught a chicken and gently placed her inside of a box that he cut some holes in. He tied the box closed with a strip of banana leaf and a discarded hair ribbon, I think. And Gift was to take it home in order to make dinner for her housemates. She kept smacking her lips and talking about how good it was going to be. And Pearl here, she looked like her mind was boggled by the execution, plucking, and butchering that had to take place before any cooking started. On our way, we leaned a spare tire against the box to keep the chicken from being bounced around. At one point, she managed to stick her head out, and so I stuck her head back down in, and I closed the box because chickens should be kept in the dark about where they're going. In conclusion, I'd just like to say I'm so grateful that God sent me to Uganda with Pearl and Marvin. I've been stretched to view people in a more generous light. I knew from my own experience that God cares deeply about widows and children. We met some amazing ladies and some very generous people who were exuberant in their praise to God. When we left, our souls had been lifted by all the praise and thanksgiving. So let's continue to work in sharing what we have and rejoice with those whose lives have been impacted. Thank you so much.
We went to a 4-hour church service, and we had Mary as our pastor that day, and you can see why. Sorry, Mary. Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Like you, perhaps, I wondered why I should go on this mission trip. And then I found kind of the answer in this little devotional. I'll just read a little paragraph. Why did God call you on this trip? Was it all of your giftedness? Was it your ministry experience? Was it your speaking, musical, theatrical, or construction abilities? Perhaps it was your theological training. You can be sure that the primary reason you're called to this trip is not for any one of those abilities. Your primary qualifications are God has deposited his presence within your heart and life, and that you have made yourself available to him. You may also have some of those other abilities and experiences, and God will use them. But God's passion is for nations to be drawn to him. God wants to exhibit himself to the people he's sending you to, and will use an available servant like you, just as you are. Okay, I'm going to sort of describe the changes that we've seen from the brand newbies that are coming in to the ones that have been there a long time. So we met them, the 2020s all the way down to the 2017s. So the new group, we asked these questions. What are your hopes for the future? What brings you joy? And what's your greatest challenge?
I'll tell you the answers from the new ones who are still starving and don't get their seeds till February. And then Marvin will tell you the rest.
I'll try.
Typically, these 100 widows who have not yet received their seeds but are just going to have their lease land in February, they hoped for food and maybe for some school fees. They said that worshiping God and seeing their children survive brought them joy. Poverty and starvation was their biggest challenge. Typically, they did not own any land or any animals. But then we also had the opportunity to meet some widows that were sponsored during the COVID years. So there was 100 in 2021 and 100 in 2020. Between that, we probably met 100 of them. And Marvin will tell you what they were like.
That wasn't very hard, was it? I thought David did all the crying, but I guess not. Okay, so the COVID years, there's 200, and we met most of them. Very busy time. So these widows reported that they had enough food to eat, and they were able to renew their land leases, which is pretty amazing. I think Pearl calculated now with 838, it's roughly $185,000 a year in value that they themselves are doing. It's pretty cool. They also had seeds for the next growing season, and they were able to send at least some of their kids to school. Okay, but they're still hoping for other things like money for medicines and maybe some clothing. We could tell that they were really gung-ho and they were going to succeed because they're such fighters. Okay, back to the 2019 group. These people are growing accustomed to having adequate food because they didn't really mention it as a need. They were able to supplement their condition by buying animals like goats and chickens. And you'll see one of them in the video. It's so cute. Okay. Also, some of them were also doing house renovations. They were actually moving their cooking areas, which were little fire pits outside, into the house. So that was a big change, and they were quite proud of it. Now from Dave Barlow's year and Mike Cody's and Kathleen's, we met with them, and they were amazing. They're like self-sufficient. They're glowing, they're wearing beautiful dresses, costume jewelry, and just so thankful for that opportunity. They're not only leasing 3, but sometimes 6 or 7 plots because it's amazing, it's working. We met a couple of them that testified that they're sending kids to university. So we were shaking our heads like testimony after testimony. They were like, succeeding. It was like, wow, this is so fun. But it's still hard work. They're the ones with the dirty, calloused hands. I think there's a picture where I put my hands against theirs. I was ashamed. And that's an update about the Widow's Garden Project from Crybaby Marvin.
From those last few years, some of them were leasing more plots, some of them were actually owning plots too. Yeah. If you ever step off the plane in Kampala, I can guarantee that you will be a millionaire. It's not as hard as it sounds because 1 million shillings is actually less than $365. So it's a quick way to be a millionaire. Just go to Kampala. But the amount of needs and asks that can come at you while you're there can be overwhelming. Of course, it's not even possible to meet all of them, and we certainly didn't while we were there, but even if we could, even if we were to imagine to meet each of things that people ask for, if we were to go back the following year, probably not much would be that different. Probably step off a millionaire and have a million needs and asks again. So when I stop in the quiet and think about that and take a step back, can really see that the Widow's Garden project is working. It's really achieving real change, as Marvin was describing. And then on top of that, it's really quite amazing bang for your buck, according to North American standards. There's only a one-time donation for any given one widow. Lots of things that I might want to support, then you need to support them again and again and again. But for one widow, it's only one donation. And it's a relatively small input, maybe several $100s, but only once. And then, as you see, it takes some time, but there is real change. And it's not just for that widow. Most of those widows are supporting 5 to 10 dependents, and they have led them to have sustainable food and eventually school and medical fees and meeting needs themselves. So they don't need to go to the millionaire stepping off the plane. They can meet the needs themselves. And then, as Marvin was alluding to, on top of that, there are now 738 widows, so not the new 100, but the other ones, that have received help and now can renew their own land leases. Well, if you think about that, that adds up to more than $150,000 that's going back into their own local economy that they themselves are paying back into it. And on top of that, there's likely a similar amount going back in school fees and basic needs. So the project is really working to achieve real change in that place. There's not very many investments that I can think of that offer such self-sustainable change. One other one that does offer sustainable change is school sponsorship. It is a key to community transformation, and it can be a means to reaching a generation for Christ. Again, similarly, it has a similar small input, something similar to what one widow would receive. But the difference is that school sponsorship needs to be repeated year over year. For example, Krista and Dave's daughter, Annika, graduated from Highland School in 2010. So that's like 12 years ago. But back then, that graduation class put 10 students through high school. Well, now one of them, Didas, he is the teacher of the senior class. He's giving back, and on top of that, he's not just teaching the class, he now accepts students into his class that can't necessarily pay all the school fees. And so it is changing the society, changing the community, not quite as instantly as the widows. Another one of those 10 students is now, she is within less than a year away from being a doctor, and Hamidou about a year away from being an engineer. So it's 12 years, it takes time, but it's coming and it's changing the community. We did this project trip jointly with Bay Community Church, and they have a project called the Uganda Possibility Project. It's through that project that there are 16 sponsored children at the school. Some of you are sponsors. Thank you very much. And 5 university students who are sponsored through there. Again, some of you are sponsors, and those students would very heartfeltly say thank you. As Carol read exactly what I was going to read from that passage, the summary was, I tell you the truth. Whatever you did for the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. And the Uganda Possibilities Project is aiming to serve Jesus by serving the people there. It's done things like medical care, it's provided bedding, it's provided school infrastructure, provided a sewing machine, all kinds of things like that. The most recent projects that it's working on, there was a vision screening clinic, which was the medical staff was paid for by Christian Blind Mission, and the Uganda Possibility Project paid for the infrastructure, like feeding the staff and driving the widows around. 233 people were screened in one day. 21 of them had fine vision, and 91% of them have vision needs. We're just meeting with Christian Blind Mission this week to determine arranging for surgeries, and again, the Uganda Possibilities Project is hoping to provide the infrastructure for that. This team took over 10 laptops that were donated to the school, and they were so excited. It was like kids on Christmas morning, as they're dreaming of a computer lab, and their computer lab currently is an empty classroom. You might see a picture, with one teeny tiny desk and one super old laptop that we'd probably throw in the garbage. But now, we got an email this week, it's set up, all these 10 computers can now work. They are waiting, they need to get desks, they can't all fit on one desk, and locks. And they have a dream of getting a printer, so they don't have to do what Mary was talking about. This school has grown over time. It used to have like 2 grades, then 3 grades, 4 grades. It got up to primary 7, which is the highest grade. But in Uganda, there's big national exam when you get to primary 7. And if you pass that, I think you can go on. And if you don't, that's the end. But those exams are long and need to be printed, and it's a big hassle to go get them printed. So they are hoping to get a printer to print their own, but then to also raise funds by printing other schools and possibly eventually being another printer in the business. And the project is trying to raise funds for Venice's house that Mary was talking about. Those 6 people sleep on a mattress that's smaller than mine, and in the rain, there's rainy time, the rain goes through it. So I wouldn't really want to be there. But we all want to thank Living Hope Church for your support of the Widow's Garden Project over all of these years. And we can tell you that with our eyes, we saw that it's working. So we're going to leave you with a video that was put together by Don Jaquest.